Every year for Thanksgiving, my wife and I travel to her parents' house to relax for a few days, watch football, eat tons of food, and go Black Friday shopping. 2 years ago, I was unable to make this trip due to an incident that happened with one of our dogs. On Tuesday night of Thanksgiving week around 11 p.m., I let our golden retriever out to go to the bathroom before I went upstairs to bed for the night. When I came back outside to let her in, she was barking very violently, sounding like she was going after another animal. When she made it into the garbage, it was apparent what happened. She had been sprayed in the face by a skunk. Fast forward 24 hours and we are dealing with a house and a dog that reeks like skunk. Needless to say, I offered to stay home with the 2 dogs while my wife made the trip to her parents. We couldn't travel with the dog, and we certainly needed to do some maintenance to try and get the smell out of the house. My wife left on Wednesday, the same day I took the dog to the groomers and began cleaning and airing out the house. After this experience, I felt it necessary to go outside with the dogs every time I left them out in the backyard, whether it was day or night, to make sure there were no further issues with a skunk. I hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary until Wednesday night, when it seemed like our shed doors had been opened slightly. Since it was that time of the year where it got dark out very early in the day, I had grown accustomed to having a flashlight with me to check the backyard before I let the dogs out. Unfortunately, we didn't have a motion light or any sort of light for the backyard, so the only source of light was the flashlight. With the dog still in the garage, I made my way to the shed to see why or what caused the door to be ajar. When I got into the shed, I thankfully didn't see any skunk or any other animal. I did, however, see a dirty towel, which I didn't remember leaving there, but I thought perhaps it was from when I was working on the lawnmower or snowblower. The next 20-ish hours went by without incident. I was spending Thanksgiving alone with my stinky dog in my stinky house, and we were getting ready to go to bed for the night. I did my normal routine of going outside with a flashlight, making sure the coast was clear before I let the dogs out of the garage. However, this time, as I was moving my flashlight across my large backyard, I flashed it towards the side of the shed to illuminate if there was anything behind it. Absolute panic set in as I saw a hooded figure behind the shed. I instinctively started to yell at the figure, asking what they were doing. By the time I went back to the garage to let our dogs out to go after the intruder, he was gone, and there was no one in my backyard. Freaked out, I contacted my wife to let her know what I had seen. She advised me to call the cops, but I decided I would just monitor the backyard for a while and ignore it if nothing further happened. About an hour later, I decided to take the flashlight and go to the window in my kitchen and shine it out into the backyard rather than go outside first. When I did this, the shine of the light caught the same hooded figure going into the shed and shutting the door behind them. At this point, I didn't know what to do. Let the dogs out, call the cops, confront the person myself. I honestly was frozen in shock. Trying to think quickly, and not wanting the person to get away, I grabbed a screwdriver to jam into the openings in the handles to prevent the shed door from opening from the inside. After I did this, I immediately called the police. The person was slamming on the shed, trying anything they could to get out. When the police arrived, they took him away. Thankfully, from the conversation I had with them, he didn't have any weapons on him. I'm not sure what the intent of the person was. Were they just trying to scare me? Were they drunk from drinking all day from Thanksgiving and didn't know where they were? I still have many unanswered questions from that night, including if the person was in the shed the night before and that's why it was left ajar. Perhaps he was just a squatter. Either way, there was no further incident after this issue, and thankfully my dog has also remained skunk-free since then. We now have motion lights installed in our backyard, which will hopefully prevent anyone from trying to break in to our property again. For a little bit of background related to this incident, I am a former athletic director of a small elementary school which also sponsors high school basketball teams. This particular event happened on Thanksgiving night 3 years ago. After I had a delicious meal on Thanksgiving with my family, my wife decided she wanted to go Black Friday shopping, so I decided to go to the gymnasium and start setting up for Friday morning. Every Thanksgiving weekend, our gym hosts a Thanksgiving basketball tournament for a handful of local high school teams. It was becoming a pretty well-recognized tradition in our community. Anyway, I spent about an hour or so setting up chairs, bleachers, prepping concessions, and getting the equipment in order. This was perfect because I could now sleep in a little tomorrow morning and not have to worry about rushing to the gym and set up. To try and give you a visual setup of the gym and its surroundings, it is a very small gym with one set of main doors that leads into a small elementary school. The school is very old and the hallways are lined with brick. If I'm being honest, it reminds me of an old prison. The lighting in the halls is dim, even in the daylight, due to lack of windows in its construction. The school apparently used to be a home for nuns in the 1930s, and I don't think it's structurally been updated very much since. In my opinion, it's a pretty creepy place. I've been in this place probably 100 times myself, and it still gives me an eerie feeling. Once I finished all my prep work for the tournament, I decided to shut the place down and go home for the night. I went into the far corner of the gym to the circuit breaker and shut off all the lights. At this point, the gym was lit by only moonlight and the glow of street lights shining in through the large gym windows. I walked into the small hallway that was basically pitch black at this point, using my cell phone flashlight to avoid running into a wall. As I walked down the long hall towards the exit, I started to hear a scratching noise. I stopped walking to try and locate the source of the noise because it was very loud and distinct. It sounded like it was coming from one of the classrooms up ahead. As I pointed my cell phone flashlight up the hall, I noticed that one of the classroom doors were open. This was odd because the policy was that all the doors were to be locked when the teachers left for the evening. Admittedly, I was a little spooked, thinking possibly an animal had gotten into the classroom or something else. But the only way to leave was passing the door in the hall to get to the main entrance, which was probably another 30 feet away. I continued down the hall, my eyes sharp to try and find the source of the noise that has now gone silent. As I passed that room, I saw something, and it definitely was not an animal. It was a green figure, a tall green silhouette of a man wearing a button-up shirt, parted hair, and long pants. And I mean tall. It was probably standing about 6.5 feet. It was just standing there, hovering, staring out the door, staring at me. It didn't move or make any noise. Its face was impossible to make out, like staring into the abyss. In the brief moment that I stood there frozen in fear, I felt very cold, like a window had been opened. I don't know why I didn't just run. I think my brain was trying to process if this was a human intruder, or if I was witnessing something I couldn't rationalize. I snapped back to reality and began to sprint down the hall, looking back once more as I ran out the main entrance, now seeing the figure in the hallway. I drove home as fast as I possibly could, not able to get the image of the figure out of my head. Of course, as you would expect every time I relay this story to my family or friends, people either think it's a joke or that I'm trying to scare them. For the rest of that year, I never went to the property by myself after dark. I came and went out the back entrance that was not supposed to be used in order to avoid that hallway. After the season was over, I resigned and appointed someone else to my position. I can't tell you what I saw or experienced that night, but I hope nothing like that ever happens to me again.